Hey, we are on the internet. Ready to start.
Thank you, Roger. Krista. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your schedules to participate in this important UIA board meeting this morning. I see from the screen that there are a couple of, at least one new face and a couple of other names that I don't recognize. So if you'll beg my indulgence, I'd like to get to know who you are. So Mr. Johnson, Dan, who are you with?
I'm with West Valley City.
Oh, very good. Very good. Nicole's on as well. Right.
So Nicole is being replaced on the board for West Valley City. Oh,
Okay. You were cutting out, Roger.
sorry about that. Dan is the new board rep from West Valley City. Did that
Very
come
good.
through?
What do you do, Dan?
I'm the Public Works Director.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very good. Very nice to meet you, sir.
It's good to be here.
And then let's see if there's anybody else in terms of the staff or members. Don't see anybody else new. We have some of our, obviously some of our great friends and partners that have joined us today to talk about debt. So I'd like to recognize Brad. Good to have you here with us, Brad, this morning. And our old friend, Tom from Key Bank. Tom, how are you doing?
Good morning, everyone. I'm well, thank you.
It's great to have you here with us.
Eric,
And then there's
Eric
Rex.
Key Bank. Yeah.
Eric's with Key Bank as well.
Yes, I am. Good morning,
Okay.
everyone.
Good morning. Nice to have you as well, Eric. Is Laura going to join us this morning?
Nate Robertson.
I think she was planning on it. We do have Nate Robertson also from Lewis
Okay.
Young. So, yeah, I don't see Laura yet.
Okay. I apologize, Nate, for overlooking you. I knew better than that. So,
That's it.
well, very good. Again,
No problem.
we're grateful to have all of you on board this morning, and hopefully this will be a productive meeting. It continues to be an exciting time for UIA and Utopia. So, welcome. The first item of business is the approval of some minutes from the June 12th, 2023 board meeting. I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve those or to make modifications, if any are needed.
Alex, this is Derek. I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Brenda. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the June 12th, 2023 board meeting. Let's just do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item is the big item on the agenda, and it's consideration of a resolution 23-05 that provides for the issuance of sales and tax revenue telecommunications revenue bonds. And I believe the amount we're talking about is $36 million to fund the ongoing installations and success of the organization. So, Jason, I believe you have some information to share regarding that, and then Brad and Tom and Nate and anybody else that has had their fingers in the financing. If you have anything to add, please do so. Jason?
Yeah. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Okay, good. I actually was going to be turning this over to the bond council, but basically what we're looking to finance here is we are looking to finance connections. We have finished the build out of the city projects, and so all the original cities are connected. What we're looking at doing now is just adding new customers with these bonds that we're going to be putting out there. Roger, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is just ongoing growth. This will be one of the better, well, probably the best transaction we've done from a borrow money and build things to generate new revenues for us. In the past, we're usually been building footprints, mainline, in order to then support installations. So this is our heaviest spend money to support new installations directly, which will generate new revenue. Now we still have opportunities where we build mainline into other cities, like with UIA or business builds or partnerships, but not for citywide fiber deployments. Those would come in with the city partnership backstops like we have, like we've seen in the past. So anyways, this is just, we don't have enough money cash generation to fund all of our new installations, but that's okay. These things create new money as we fund additional installations. We're forecasting something like 10,000 for the next year, maybe a little less than that, but that's a lot of construction to fund, even though it's just installations. But also the other miscellaneous partnerships and projects do cost quite a bit, which will generate revenues and pay for themselves. That frees up cash generation so that we can do maybe more aggressive dividend payments to the city and pay off the other bonds, things like that. So this is just kind of keeping things moving and keeping up with the success we've been having. So that's all I've got for this item.
Okay, thank you. Are there, before Brad speaks to this, or Tom, if he has an interest, are there any questions from, pardon?
Laura Lewis has joined us too, just so you know who is in the room. So we had.
Okay, all right, very good, Laura. Welcome. So are there any questions from the board to Roger or Jason regarding their comments?
This is Bren Bybee. I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Brent.
So one, is this debt service primarily paid for with new revenue, as we've done with other debt service? And then two, can you explain how this is sales tax related? I hear it was a sales tax related bond.
I can talk a little bit to that. This is not sales tax related. This will only be secured by the revenues of UIA and nothing else. We will be getting a rating from Fitch, and based off that rating and based off our revenues, that's what's going to determine. That's what's going to determine what sort of rate we get on it. So, and the revenues generated from this will, yes, they will be easily paying for the amount of the bond that we're taking out.
And Bren, I will add to that these bonds will be issued on parity with the other outstanding UIA bonds. And with that, the city's pledge for franchise fees is also a security technically, and we haven't had to draw on that. But the bonds will be telecommunications systems revenue bonds, but that franchise fee from long ago that we've never had to give is still technically pledged because they are on parity with those bonds.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Fair to say this doesn't increase any exposure to the cities from a sales tax perspective.
Correct.
That's the response to anyone asking about how this affects the sales tax pledge.
Okay, so just so that I'm representing well, what is the name of this bond then? Was it sales revenue bond? Is that what someone said?
Telecommunications revenues. And Brad probably has it pulled up right in front of him and I don't, so.
They are known as tax exempt telecommunications revenue bonds.
Okay, thank
use
you.
the word tax, but it's tax exempt.
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you, Brent, for that clarification. Are there other questions from the board? Okay, Brad, do you or Laura want to, or Tom want to speak
About
to the
Brad.
transaction?
Yeah,
Anything?
Mr. Chairman, this is Brad Patterson. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm coming to you live from a hotel room in New York City today, so hopefully you can hear okay. What we have before us is a resolution for issuance of some telecommunications revenue bonds. As was mentioned previously, these bonds are secured by the revenues of the UIA system, as well as the pledge from the cities that was done back in 2011 of the franchise tax revenues. This doesn't increase the obligation of the cities of their franchise tax revenues in any way. One of the great things about this particular bond issue is that we are only able to issue bonds as long as we have certain coverage requirements, and we actually satisfy those coverage requirements. That means revenues are growing, so we can issue additional bonds, and I think that's a good thing. The resolution authorized the issuance of the Series 2023 bonds. It grants to certain individuals, the chair of the board, the vice chair of the board, chief executive officer, and the secretary treasurer, the ability to determine the final terms of the bonds, as long as those terms of the bonds are within certain parameters that are going to be adopted shortly or anticipated to be adopted shortly. The bonds can't exceed a maximum principal amount of $36 million. They can't have an interest rate more than 6.5% per annum. They can't mature in more than 30 years from their respective dates, and they cannot be issued at a discount any greater than 97% of their principal amount. The resolution also authorized the execution and delivery of certain other documents, such as a bond purchase contract, a 6th supplemental indenture. That's kind of interesting for me to actually say that we're on the 6th supplemental indenture here out of this particular series of bonds. And that just goes to show kind of the strength of the growth of this particular program. We also authorize the distribution of a preliminary official statement as well as a final official statement. As people are aware, the official statement is the document pursuant to which the bonds are offered to the investing public. And then it authorizes certain officers to go ahead and take such other actions that will permit the issuance of the bonds. And so with that, I will be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. One thing I'd like to add before we field questions relates to the the comment that Jason made relative to the fact that we have to get these bonds rated. If this were a sales tax bond, slam dunk, this would be a A+, AA- type of credit. But this is a very unique credit to the rating agencies, and frankly, they haven't known what to do with it for how many years have we been doing this, right?
Sure.
Because of that, their approach to this focuses on an analysis that they do called FADS. It's something about debt service, has nothing to do with debt service coverage. It's all related to the amount of debt you have outstanding relative to the revenues that you're generating. And in my humble opinion, they hang way too much on that. Jason has spent hours. I have spent not quite as many, but several hours having conversations with the rating agency in advance of getting the real rating from them, because they're currently rated BBB-, which is like we're hanging on by a hair. If they don't like what we're doing, we're going to be subject to a downgrade. So I had a conversation with one of their business people on last week sometime, and we have arrived at an approach with them where we will pay for let's call it half the rating fee, but it won't be a full rating in case they surprise us. I'm not expecting them to surprise us. It's called a FADS analysis. The FADS analysis is with this issue, it shows that in future years it will be declining because of what Roger said. These are revenues that will be deployed more quickly toward, their bond will be used to connect more quickly to revenue generating customers, and so it really will help that analysis. I just want everyone to be aware. I think there's a very microscopic chance But there is a chance that they come back and say, hey, we don't like this right now, and we would probably stand down for a while. But again, we try to be very well prepared so that does not happen. But they do not, sadly, if you read the rating report, they do not even mention debt service coverage. They barely give attention to the fact that the cities, have pledged $5.15 million to these bonds that have never been hit, but it's still available. They don't take that into account. So I don't like the analysis that they're the only game in town. So we have to take what we get.
There's also, Alex, if I could bring up, there's one thing I was going to bring up, I forgot. Like I said, when we started, we aren't doing any build out of cities with this money. We're just doing connections pretty much is what we're looking at. And we're talking about business and residential connections. Because of that, usually in the past, when we've issued bonds, we have done 3 years of capitalized interest. I'm recommending that we do 1 year of capitalized interest on these bonds, because from day one, the money's going to be spent on connecting customers, and the revenue to cover the bond payment will be coming in. So we won't be having as much capitalized interest in these bonds.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a wise approach. Laura, a question for you based on your comments, not to belabor the issue, but are the individuals involved at the rating agencies the same as we've been dealing with in the past, or are there new eyes looking at this now that are kind of recreating the wheel we've covered many times?
Thankfully, they're the same people, but they are just entrenched in, this is how we're going to look at it, right? At one point, I called Jason, telling him I was concerned that they were going to switch analysts and we were going to have to start all over again. But they've stuck with the same analyst, which is, I think on the whole, it's probably good, because I think they become a little bit more familiar with Utopia and UIA and how well things are going, but they just can't seem to get out of the trenches relative to how what their focus is on that debt leverage ratio.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom Kovac. May I jump in for a moment?
Absolutely, Tom.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, it's our privilege to be part of your working group, and we do value the relationship that we have with Utopia here at KeyBank. Laura, one of the things we might want to touch on just a little bit is the fact that both Lewis Young and KeyBank continue to move forward with efforts to approach other rating agencies to see if they'll hear our plea to perhaps look at the credit. We've been unsuccessful to date, but I think it's worth noting to the board that we do continue to advance the cause of UIA and Utopia with other rating agencies, albeit it has been unsuccessful to date. We don't stop trying to advance the efforts with other rating agencies to see if they would give a credit assessment as well.
And I think it's also worth noting, Tom, that KeyBank has been just phenomenal in terms of assisting with investor outreach when we come to market with these bonds, and it's because of that they're very well received. And I don't know, it's been a couple of years probably. We sat in a room with Mackay Shield, one of your large investors. I think they're like the second or third largest maybe investor in UIA bonds. And, we sat in a room with their analysts who, looked right at us and said, this rating is wrong. It should be higher. Like, well, that's music to my ears. I just wish we could get them to agree to that, right? So, the investors who really understand this credit understand that they're, probably buying an A+-ish credit that is, sadly is kind of saddled with a BBB- rating, because they don't, again, we're unique. They don't know what to do with us. They don't have anything to compare it to. And I'm hoping that will change over time as more local governments do this. But like Tom said, we're trying, but so far we haven't been able to get the ear of Standard & Poor's.
Right. I think if you were to look at any other type of credit that had the type of coverage and revenue mix and revenue strength and growth, not only potential growth, but real growth, the rating would be much stronger. And so suffice it to say that the folks that work with your staff are tirelessly and aggressively championing the cause of this is a stronger credit than everyone thinks it is. So we don't give up on that fact.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Laura. Are there any questions from board members to regarding the financing? Again, to either Brad, Tom, or Laura.
Hey, Alex, it's Derek again. So quick question. The resolution actually allows us to privately place this debt. I guess if somebody would speak to that, my understanding on privately placed debt is that we're not even really worried about a rating on it. Maybe there's no thought that we could actually get this debt privately placed. If somebody could talk to that just briefly.
And so I'm happy to speak to that. Again, let's go back to Fitch and their, sort of archaic way of looking at this rating. Having, being very well aware of how they, look at this rating, and knowing that UIA was approaching, the desire to issue more bonds so they can make more connections. I mean, it's very smart from a business perspective. I was, I don't know, Jason, was it 6-ish months ago? Maybe it was not even that long ago. The two analysts came out here and met with Utopia and UIA and had them in the room face to face. And I said, so what if we did subordinated debt? Because, if we did subordinated debt, Derek, that would be what I would think to do, sort of a private placement on that subordinate debt. And we were met with, the board upside the head of, yep, that goes right into the FADS analysis. We don't care that it's subordinate. Again, it makes your coverage stronger, but they don't care about that debt service coverage. So while it is technically impossible to do a private placement, the market right now is such that, we would, at best, we would probably only be able to get fixed rates out for 10 years. And then there would be this big fat balloon payment, right? That would be subject to higher interest rates. And where, KeyBank Capital Markets has developed a great and deep investor, it makes the most sense to do this as a public offering. Did that answer your question, Derek?
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.
I can't see your face. I don't know if you're rolling your eyes or.
To be honest with you, I'm sitting in Jackson Hole and the Fitch rating guy is in presenting in a conference I'm at. I'll go wrangle him as soon as we get done here. So
please do that.
Thank you, Derek. Any other questions from the board members?
I apologize. I have a couple more.
Go ahead, Brent.
So one question is I know that generally our revenue projections have been on a good trajectory. I'm just curious, specifically over the last just few months, are we still in a good spot in terms of revenue growth?
That's been great. Jason could probably be more specific.
I will say that I do know that June and July, as far as customer growth, they're two very, very large months that we've had in the history. Going back, COVID was higher, but I think that other than COVID, they're as high as we've seen.
Yeah, 2 months, not this last one represented in the subscriber report, but the month before that was the best month we'd had since the COVID ramping up months. This last month was just a little shy of that, but one of the best months we've ever had. So things are overall trending. We were pretty excited about 200 to 300 customers coming on before COVID. COVID hit, we had a record of, I think it was 1199 on 1 month. So almost 1,200 installations in a month, which was insane. And then things came back down into the 500 a month range after COVID. And that's been kind of ticking up. And this is including everything. So not just Utopia or UIA, we've got some Utopia partnership cities, we've got a lot of things, but just conceptually, things are actually better now than they've ever been, except for the COVID bumps that were a little bit better.
Great. And then does this debt service, does this financing allow us to be able, does it allow UIA and Utopia to essentially cash flow the dividends that were approved in our latest kind of budget projections?
If we weren't financing our capital needs like installations and all this other stuff, the only way we could fund those would be from cash. And suddenly our cash position would be very tight, and our ability to pay those dividends, I'm assuming we wouldn't be able to do it. We'd either have to slow down on the installations. I mean, installations is a great problem to have, right? To have to fund those because they create money. But it would be kind of one or the other, I guess, to some extent. Issuing more debt and paying for installations, we don't see that as like, oh crud, we have to do this in order to pay the dividend, but the practicality is it's probably somewhat true. But the new debt does create new revenues, so it doesn't hurt us. It'll actually pay for itself and then some. So it'll be a kind of hit multiple buckets of continue to allow us to not just make the dividend payment, but we're hoping to be ramping that up over time and fund our capital needs.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
if I could add to that, Bren, what I would say is, if we don't have these bonds, growing revenues and paying dividends would become conflicting priorities, and we'd have to make a decision.
Thank you for that confirmation and validation. Last question is, given kind of inflation, construction prices and stuff, how many approximately how many connections do we think we'll be able to complete with this debt service?
I can tell you, I have some numbers, Roger. When we look at residential connections, we're looking at 11,150. And then there'll be a lot of business connections on top of that. And we have to keep up with open trench and greenfield opportunities in cities and stuff like that.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the extra details.
I always got to put the disclaimer. People are always like, well, when is this the last one? I would just put the expectation out there that it probably isn't. Again, we're paying off old bonds, and those are, we'll make progress there. But as far as when we make the decision to say, hey, let's just fund all new growth from cash coming off of these projects, well, if we're accelerating our growth, that's a great problem to have, and that puts a kind of a back pressure on our ability to cash fund our growth. So I would anticipate that there's probably going to be future bonds beyond this one. They are probably slowing down and decreasing in size. But at the same time, we'll be paying off bonds and getting further from just interest and getting deeper into principal payments over time. So the financial position will be getting phenomenal over the future here as we continue to do this. But I wouldn't say, hey, this is the last bond. There's probably going to be needs to continue to finance capital improvements and expansion.
But with that, Roger, I mean, hopefully some of the same principles would be used, right? In terms of, making sure there's a margin in terms of a net benefit on the revenue and the financial strength of the organization.
Yeah, we've been given that direction, right, from the board is what are our priorities. For a while there, it was get the system built out, and we've checked that box. And now it's maximize debt relief to the cities. And so to maximize debt relief, we need to grow our revenues. So this is a strategy to that end. We're not trying to further entrench cities. We're actually trying to further relieve the debt burden of the cities, and this is the means to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Roger, do you have anything additional to add? Oh, go ahead.
One last from Derek. So this is Derek. So
Okay, Derek.
obviously from the environment that we've left to where we're at now, 6.5% interest rate sounds awful. But, and I'm probably getting a little bit ahead, but as far as when we price these things out, obviously our ability to refinance, I think, is going to be an important thing. And that's probably going to come back in, you know, the way these bonds bid out. So just a comment for me, I'd like to see something that has the ability, at least in the first 10 years, that we could look at refinancing this thing.
Yeah, we're typically, we would, you know, for most bond issues across the board, you can get a 10-year par call without any increase in your interest rate. We've been seeing quite regularly that we can push for a 9-year par call, and that the purchasers are okay with that without, again, stinging us on interest rate. We could, you know, ask to be more aggressive, but anything more aggressive than a 9-year call, I'm quite certain it will cost us and probably won't be worth the benefit. But we're well aligned, Derek, to make sure, because I have the same, you know, concern that, you know, want to be able to refund these as soon as we can. And, you know, in typical interest rate cycles, we'll end up in low interest rates again. And so they will be callable. I haven't had this specific conversation about this specific bond issue in today's market with KeyBank Capital Markets, but we will have that discussion with them and seek to get a 9-year par call if we can.
Yeah, Derek, this is Brad. One other thing to bear in mind as well is that 6.5% is a maximum parameter. I think that your true interest cost is going to be less than that. And Tom and Laura can probably speak to that far better than I can.
I would love to address that, but I don't have the numbers up. I'll chime in with the rate here as soon as I pull them up.
The best rate we can get, 6.5 is not what we're expecting. We're hoping that that's just the maximum parameter. Any questions?
I'm ready to make a motion, Alex, if you're ready.
Okay, yeah, I am. We'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2305, which again provides for the issuance and sale of not more than 36 million aggregate principal amounts of tax exempt telecommunication revenue bonds, and then fixing the principal and a series of other things that Brad has spoke to and Laura spoke to earlier. So I'm happy to entertain a motion, Derek, from you if you want to make that.
Yeah, I'll make that motion on what you presented. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Oh, Roger?
Do you want to make that comment?
And setting the public hearing as well in the motion.
Yes.
I'll accept the public hearing date as well in motion.
And what is that date?
September
Just for the record.
18th.
September 18th, okay. Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion, including the date of the
I'll
public hearing?
second that, Alex. Jason Sand.
Okay, Jason, thank you. Let's do a roll call vote for this. Brenda,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Jason Sant,
Yes.
Ren,
Yes.
Derek.
Aye.
Did I miss anyone?
Nope, just yourself.
Leighton is an aye as well. Okay, very good. Thank you. I think this was a healthy, good discussion. And I think one of the great things, not to editorialize too much about it, is that UIA continues to be in a very strong financial situation. And I don't foresee that changing down the road, just based on the way that's being managed and structured. I mean, things can happen, but I think that really the key to this is the board and of course our partners and the political environment in our communities. But it's great to be in a position where we have strong revenue and we have choices. We have a lot of tools in the financial toolbox, if you will. And in order to meet demands and needs, we have flexibility in deciding to choose this tool versus another tool. And so while some of us may be, I know Wade, for example, is pretty debt averse. In this case, it makes perfect sense, and it's a good way to leverage the resources that we have and still meet other priorities. But the point I wanted to make, which I think you all understand, is the key to that is our management and direction and support of staff in our approaches. And as long as we continue to think clearly and to be financially responsible, I don't see that this situation is going to change. There's always going to be trade-offs and priorities, but the health, in the past at least, the health of the network and the continued progress and expansion of the network to generate revenue has been the key priority, because that ultimately, like Roger said, is what allows us to pay back the debt service obligations, which is an important priority. But we won't do that, at least from my perspective, if it kills the golden goose, right? We've got to put first things first, and this continued growth and evolution is what allows us to have the revenue to take care of the debt obligations of the city. So all of you probably understood that. I just want to reemphasize that, and we're in control of that. So thank you for the communication and participation today. I think it's been a good discussion, a healthy one. So let's move on to the next item on the.
I'll just
Pardon?
answer Derek's question. I've pulled up those numbers, and the current estimated true interest cost on the numbers is about 5.53%. Obviously that, could go up or down as we get into the market, but that's what we're currently estimating.
Okay, thank you, Laura. The next item on the agenda is a financial update. So Jason, do you have anything additional to add generally about the finances?
I do. I've just got a quick presentation. This shouldn't take very long. Let me share my screen.
And then while you're doing that, Kim, would you be prepared to speak to take rates and demand and so forth as well, if Jason doesn't touch on those?
I've got you, Alex. I always have you.
Okay. Hopefully you're all able to see my screen here. This is just an update of budget to actual for year end, looking at June 30th numbers. So if you look as of we had a budgeted revenue of $33.5 million, and we came in just under that at 33.3. I think I had been mentioning it looked like we were going to come in a couple $100,000 under in our previous couple board meetings that we looked at, but we were pretty close. And then as far as expense goes, we had a $28.4 million actual spend, an original budget of 28.3. So we were over by 50,000, but the budget I have in here isn't reflective of the budget adjustment we did for year end. We actually adjusted for this amount. I think we put an extra $100,000 in, and so we were covered there. There is one new thing I wanted to show you guys, just so you can kind of understand how revenue flow works here at Utopia, or UIA, I should say specifically. And at UIA, we have we put on customers during the year, so each month we have more revenue than the month before. What I wanted to show everybody is if we're looking at, if I take just the month of June and I multiply out their results and take those results times 12 to show how much money we would get in a year based off of June's results, I wanted to show you kind of what that looks like compared to what we had in June for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. So you'll see we ended the year with $33.3 million of revenue. If we just take June's results and annualize them, we're at $36.1 million of revenue. So as far as the revenue increase we show in the budget for next year, we already have $2.8 million of that revenue increase coming in monthly as of day one when we get into the budget. The second column that I show there shows 36.1 million of revenue coming in for the year as if we had June's results. And then what was budgeted for 2024. So during the rest of the year, we need to make up the $3.3 million to get to what we have in the revenue budget. Any questions about any of that? If not, I'll show you what we have on the revenue and expense charts here. So here's our combined recurring revenue. And as you can see, it is still increasing and increasing at a fast rate. We're still seeing the growth that we've seen. And then here's just for UIA, if you take the revenue that we receive monthly versus the monthly amount we need to make debt service, which is that top line, that top straight line that it shows there, that's the total of all the debt service payments we have to make. The difference is the monthly increase in revenue that we've got since we started UIA. And that's the same as we look at every month. Any questions on those? If not, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Kim, do you have anything to add in terms of what you're seeing in the market in terms of demand or competition?
I'm not seeing anything in our specific cities for competition. You do see some, Verizon and some of those plays that are being made in the South that we see. But in our cities, we are still seeing some growth in all of our cities. I'm not seeing anything to worry about necessarily, but we are seeing some different little bit of tactics that we're adjusting some of our marketing strategies to address. But no, I'm really happy with the take rates. And I think they're going to continue to grow. Alex, I don't have any bad news or anything super big to talk about today.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Kim.
You are welcome.
Any questions of the board regarding the financial update? Okay, if not, thank you. And we'll move on to the next item, which is a network update. Roger?
All right. Hopefully you can see this subscriber report. So we've started putting this into the packet rather than emailing it out. Although we have board meetings every other month, so I'll email out the interim ones. Just want to call out attention to certain things that are exciting. I've put some of them in green here just so cities and things will pop out a little bit. So where we consider a city substantially complete, that doesn't necessarily mean 100%. We might have a couple of pockets of wrap up here and there, but where we've finished the footprints in almost all of the city, other than those little wrap up areas are done, we consider that substantially complete. So Pleasant Grove and Santa Clara now are what we consider to be substantially complete, where almost anyone in the city can sign up with a few exceptions. And then we've started in Bountiful. So that's a Utopia partnership instead of a UIA partnership. That's one where they are the ones financing and own that, which is why it's not in a UIA. But we have an agreement with them to basically oversee and build and operate that network in their behalf, and then we charge them fees for that. We have done a groundbreaking. We were actually in construction mode there already, so that's progressing nicely. It's interesting, kind of if you look at the longer term trends of how things shake out, we've always kind of seen, I think in the past we thought Utopia would kind of fizzle to some extent because there was no opportunity for revenue growth there, and UIA would be where all the growth was. But because of the structure of non-finance projects being a partnership with Utopia, because that's where the people and operations are, we actually see those partnerships bringing significant revenue to Utopia, which then maybe decreases the amount of money we need to send from UIA to Utopia to cover management overhead and other functions. So anyways, any progress and growth and good things happening at Utopia from that perspective are very good to UIA. So we, again, reporting them collectively here under Utopia Fiber is a term, is how we do the subscriber reports. But that's exciting for all of us, I think, to have those projects. We are over 57,000 customers now. You know, as of the first of the month, we were just one shy. It's a little disappointing to see that. But
I'll pick up twice if I don't know.
Yeah. It's really good progress. The take rates here, we did notice some anomalies, and we've kind of dug into the details. You'll see some decreasing take rate. It hit us in two places. It was in Murray and Pleasant Grove, where the actual total number of subscribers still grew, but we saw a take rate go down, and that's because we're reporting on residential, and we had a couple of category changes where a group of residential customers in a bulk order for residential became classified as a business, because we do consider a bulk service with an apartment complex or condos or HOA or something like that. Those are sold as a business product in our catalog and service things. So that shifted things from residential to business, which pulled it out of the residential take rate report. It doesn't mean we actually lost the customers though. If you were to go to those specific cities and look at their subscriber numbers, they were still very good. So we're trying to figure out, maybe there's a third category that we can classify things in for those bulk situations so they don't skew our reporting. So in some cases, it's really helpful to see a residential take rate because that tells one story, but we're just kind of noticing that gets skewed a little bit with how we manage the data. So just don't be concerned about that. If you think, oh crud, a take rate went down, you can go to the detail for that city. Murray, for example, let's see, that's Midvale. Here's Murray. You can see that the total number of subscribers continued to grow, even though the residential take rate went down, and that was kind of the classification. So that's a way to not worry about it. Fortunately, we're still seeing subscribers coming on across the board. To the comments of Kim made earlier of, we're seeing some other things show up like Verizon home internet and T-Mobile home internet and things like that. They're actually meant to be a home internet service. We're still not losing customers to those things, right? Obviously that becomes a big discussion point for cities like Bountiful as they're just starting into this effort of, do we really think this is relevant? Is there demand? Are there competitive options? And it's more popular and higher take rates today than we've ever seen in the history. So despite lots of other things coming to market, fiber isn't just keeping pace with them, it's actually furthering its lead over all of those other competing technologies as we set records on our take rates across the board and haven't seen any negative trend on anywhere. So it's good. It's all good. We'll be celebrating 60,000 subscribers here in a few months. And that's my update for subscribers and cities. Any questions for me? Okay.
It doesn't appear. Thank you, Roger, and thanks to the staff. That brings us to the end of the agenda. The formal agenda? Are there any other issues or questions that any member of the board would like to raise? Okay, very good. Again, before we close, I'd like to thank Brad and Laura and Nate and Tom and Eric for the great partnerships we've had through the years that have helped us to be successful, very successful. And there's only a few of us that have been around long enough to know the significance of those partnerships. So we appreciate you, each of you, and wish the best to you and for you. And thank you also to the board members and what you continue to contribute in your own cities and preaching the vision of UIA and Utopia and what it does for our communities. So you're a key. So we thank you for that, and then obviously the staff for the excellent work you do day in and day out to keep this thing moving. So big thanks to everybody, and thank you for your time. If there's no other questions or comments, we have to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn our meeting.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Is there a second?
Second from Derek.
Thank you, Derek. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
any opposed? I assume none. Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Have a great day and be safe.